Did you know you got to be one of the elderly to run for President of the United States? What do you mean that's not true? Why do they all look like they're one birthday away from becoming a crypt keeper? Welcome to A Brief History of the Past. I'm Kaelan and today we're exploring the history of the Presidents of the United States. Hang on, this is going to be another one of them four-parter episodes like when we did the history of the monarchy. One long video? Well, I don't want to. How many presidents are there anyway? 45? I thought there was like 17, tops. The 13 American colonies declared their independence from Britain on July 4th, 1776, though it was a long time coming before that. The colonies had already been at war with Great Britain for over a year due to increased taxation from the Crown. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, really. It ain't easy to make a living on land you've stolen from the indigenous population, while at the same time having to worry about taxation without representation, am I right? As per usual with these sorts of history videos, we'll give a brief breakdown of each president, starting with the first one, John Hanson. John Hanson. Who's John Hanson?
As everyone here is in the same boat, there's no harm in my revealing some details, and my instructions are to do so.
Before the Constitution was drafted, America had the Articles of Confederation. Under these, 8 men were appointed to serve 1-year terms, with John Hanson becoming the first President of the United States in Congress assembled under the Articles of Confederation. That's a mouthful, isn't it? The position held by Hanson from November 5th, 1781 to November 3rd, 1782 was a ceremonial one that had far less power than the presidency under the Constitution. Hanson didn't actually care for the position, but the articles hadn't taken succession into account, so he finished his term. Hanson introduced the Treasury Department, the first Secretary of War, the first Foreign Affairs Department, and established Thanksgiving on the 4th Thursday in November. That's an awful lot for someone who doesn't even feature into the cliff notes of the country. Couldn't they have, I don't know, put him on some legal tender or something? Maybe a halfpenny or, I don't know, stuck his face on a turkey around the holidays. The first President of the United States under the Constitution was George Washington, serving 2 terms from 1789 to 1797. Washington had a distinguished military career beforehand, fighting in the French and Indian War, and serving as Commander-in-Chief in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. Now, as President, he had no political affiliations and actually opposed the formation of parties, thinking that it would create conflict that could undermine the Republic. Please, like people would ever get so petty that they let their political affiliations negatively impact their government.
Gentleman's out of order.
Like, didn't Washington cut down one of his dad's cherry trees and then when confronted about it he told the truth? Huh? It was a lie made up by Mason Locke Weems to help sell his biography books about the former president. That's what you call ironic. The second president was John Adams, who served from 1797 to 1801. Adams was the first and only president elected under the Federalist Party, which was America's first political party made prominent by Alexander Hamilton. During his term, he was the first president to take up residence in the executive mansion that would become known as the White House. Oh, I see how it is. Washington is over here like, oh no, don't pay me for my services, I'm a public servant. But John Adams is like, hey, you mind if I crash on the executive couch? I always knew Adams was a bum.
Damn you, Adams!
The third president was Thomas Jefferson, who served 2 terms from 1801 to 1809. Jefferson, along with James Madison, created the Democratic Republican Party to oppose Hamilton's Federalist Party. Now, during Jefferson's terms, he organized the Louisiana Purchase, which I think we all know is Spanish for Louise and Anna, Louise y Anna, right? So clearly, he's making a deal with these 2 ladies, and so, what? What do you mean that's not right?
That's a red dwarf. We have in our midst a complete smeg pot. Brains in the anal region.
Apparently, the Louisiana Purchase was a real estate deal that would double the nation's land area. And Jefferson signed an act prohibiting importation of slaves, though Jefferson himself will continue to own and trade slaves that worked on his plantations, and thus the modern political practice of do as I say, not as I do was born.
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me.
James Madison was the fourth president, serving from 1809 to 1817. During his 2 terms, Madison spearheaded the War of 1812, in which America thought it could easily capture Canada and use it as a bargaining chip in all its disputes with Britain. I assume, with the name of the war, that Madison had it buttoned up that same year, yeah? What? It was dragged on for 3 years? I mean, I suppose the War of 1812 sounds better than the War of Hubris.
So what's it to you, butthead?
James Monroe would serve as the 5th president from 1817 to 1825. Monroe signed the Missouri Compromise into legislation, and let me tell you, what a compromise. Have you ever been to Missouri? Nightmare. What? The legislation added Maine and Missouri to the Union as a free state and slave state respectively, while also prohibiting slavery above the 36th parallel with the exception of Missouri. Oh. Wait, how's that supposed to change my mind about Missouri again? John Quincy Adams was the 6th president, serving from 1825 to 1829. Interestingly enough, Adams ran against Andrew Jackson, William Crawford and Henry Clay in the 1824 election, none of which won the majority in the electoral vote, and the winner had to be selected by the House of Representatives. So, one might say he was the president no one wanted.
Disgrace, shame, humiliation.
Andrew Jackson was the 7th president from 1829 to 1837. He gained fame as a general in the United States Army, becoming a national hero for his victory at the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. But, as president, he also signed the Indian Removal Act into effect in 1830, which forcibly relocated most Native American tribes, causing widespread death and disease. And they put him on the 20? Who's in charge of that decision? Probably Jackson himself, I imagine. Martin Van Buren served as the 8th president from 1837 to 1841, and was most known for his time on The Muppet Show performing opposite Statler. What? What do you mean that's not him? You shaved that mustache off Waldorf and you've got Van Buren, I'm telling you.
This show should be reported to the Consumer Protection Agency.
Van Buren is known for being the first president to have English as his second language, as his mum was Dutch. He was also an advisor under Jackson's 2 terms and helped create the organisational structure for the Democratic Party. Huh. And here I thought the Dutch just wore wooden shoes and got high all the time. I would like to apologise to the Dutch people. It has come to my attention that I may have said some things that were a bit insensitive to you. And look, I get it, you know. You don't just wear wooden shoes, you know. I mean, you also dance in them. It's actually pretty impressive when you think about it. So I would like to apologise again for my previous comments, which were also insensitive. So to the people of Dutchland, to any of the Dutch that may be watching this video, look, I've said some things that I regret. You know, I've said some things that you probably regret. And, you know, you're more than just your stereotypes. So from the bottom of my heart, I apologise. Did we get it? Did we get that one? Oh, thank goodness, because I also forgot they don't like to share bills at mealtimes. William Henry Harrison was the 9th president, serving in 1841. Harrison was the first member of the Whig Party to serve in office. The Whig Party? Oi, Bill! Hey, we're going to start our own political party, mate. You want in? I do, and I've got just a name for it. The Whig Party got its name from the English anti-monarchist party and used it in an attempt to portray Andrew Jackson as King Andrew. You know, I'll take back what I said earlier. Politicians are an incredibly petty lot.
And it is glorious!
Unfortunately for the Whigs, Harrison died just 31 days into his term from pneumonia-like symptoms. He would be succeeded by his vice president, John Tyler, who served from 1841 to 1845. Before Harrison, no president had died in office, and it created some issues for Tyler. It was unclear if the vice president became president or was still just the vice president acting as president. The cabinet fought the latter, but Tyler was insistent on the former and immediately had himself sworn into office, setting the precedent for future successions. Tyler would be the youngest president to that point at 51 years old. 51! I told you only the elderly get to be president. James K. Polk was the 11th president. 11? We're only at 11? Have you no mercy?
We do not train to be merciful here. Mercy is for the weak.
Polk served from 1845 to 1849 and is most known for expanding the United States territory, including the annexation of the Republic of Texas, the Oregon Territory, and what is modern-day California, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, parts of Colorado, New Mexico, and Wyoming from his victory during the Mexican-American War. What's the K in James K. Polk stand for? Conqueror? What? Well, of course I know conqueror isn't spelled with a K. I'm not a moron. Everyone knows you spell it with a Q. Zachary Taylor, or your grandfather who just woke up angry from a nap, was the 12th president, serving only 16 months, dying from a stomach disease on July 9, 1850. Taylor had become a national hero from victories during the Mexican-American War and became the first president to be elected without serving in a previous political office. Oh, way to set an irresponsible example, Zach.
I am officially running for President of the United States.
Millard Fillmore. Millard? Millard. Is it French? Millard Fillmore? No? It's just Millard. Alright, well, Millard Fillmore was Taylor's VP and would succeed him, serving from 1850 to 1853. Fillmore would be the last Whig to hold the presidency and was instrumental in the passing of the Compromise of 1850. Tell you what, I'd like to pass the Compromise of 2020 where we stop and take this up again in a new video. The Compromise of 1850 was a package of 5 bills passed by Congress that diffused a political confrontation between free states and slave states that had been brewing since the acquisition of territories from the Mexican-American War. The Compromise also created the Fugitive Slave Act, but also banned the slave trade in Washington, D.C. I mean, I guess getting something negative in the Fugitive Slave Act in exchange for something positive like the banning of the slave trade in DC is the epitome of the word compromise, but I don't know. I just feel like we should have called it that we're not all dicks, just some of us are dicks of 1850.
Generally, I like it.
Franklin Pierce was the 14th president, serving from 1853 to 1857. Well, he looks like a young whippersnapper. How old was he as president? 32? 35? 49? Must be a yearbook picture then. Pierce saw the anti-slavery movement as a threat to the unity of the nation, and so he alienated anti-slavery groups by enforcing the Fugitive Slave Act and signing the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which effectively repealed the Missouri Compromise. Pierce's actions would set the stage for the Civil War. Yeah, he would fall into that some of us are dicks category.
Logical.
James Buchanan was the 15th president, serving from 1857 to 1861. What can I say about James Buchanan that ain't already been said? Moving on. What? I'm tired of talking about presidents. I mean, what's there to say about him anyway? That he influenced the Supreme Court's decision in the Dred Scott case, which denied a slave's petition for freedom, thus rendering the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, or that he tried admitting Kansas into the Union as a slave state, or that southern states started seceding from the Union just weeks after he lost the 1860 election to Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. What? What do you mean he wasn't a vampire hunter? Looks like we're going to pick up with Abraham Lincoln next time, because apparently I'm no longer making sense. I'm just saying, if he wasn't a vampire hunter, how do you explain the lack of vampires now? Vampires don't exist. Yeah, because he killed them all. You're welcome. Now we're starting part 2 off with the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Now, since the last video, I have been set straight that he wasn't a vampire hunter. But I know he helped Bill and Ted with their history report. There's no change in my mind about that one.
Party on, dudes!
Lincoln held office from 1861 to 1865. Tensions were already high between northern and southern states over banning the expansion of slavery at the time. When Lincoln was elected, some southern states used it as an opportunity to adopt an ordinance of secession, starting with South Carolina. Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas would soon follow, declaring themselves a sovereign nation, the Confederate States of America. more like the wanker states of America. Lincoln, as well as Buchanan before him, refused to recognize the Confederacy, making secession illegal. Interestingly enough, during Lincoln's inaugural address, he proclaimed that he had no inclination to abolish slavery in the southern states. Well, they left that little detail out of the history books in primary school, didn't they? Lincoln was president for the entirety of the American Civil War. Over the course of the war, between 600,000 and 750,000 people died, making it the deadliest military conflict in American history. During the war, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which changed the status of enslaved African Americans from slave to free. All they had to do was escape Confederate control, make it back to the North, and then they were permanently free. You make it sound so easy.
That sounded easy.
Lincoln also promoted the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which would abolish slavery entirely. It would be passed during Lincoln's term. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be ratified by the states until December 6, 1865, after his death. On the night of April 14, 1865, just 5 days after the end of the Civil War, Lincoln was shot and mortally wounded by actor and Confederate spy John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theatre. You know, I've always said that actors are the scum of the earth. Andrew Johnson was Lincoln's vice president and succeeded him as the 17th president, serving from 1865 to 1869. Johnson's focus was restoring the seceded states to the Union and not protecting the rights of freed slaves. He would veto legislation that Congress passed to make former slaves into American citizens, but Congress was able to overturn the veto, passing the Civil Rights Act of 1866. I can't believe I'm saying this, but can we get an applause break for Congress? Johnson is most known for the Alaska Purchase, where he purchased Alaska. That's all there is to it. I guess if I tried to prevent African Americans from being citizens, I'd rather be remembered for buying Alaska from Russia as well. Ulysses S. Grant was the 18th president from 1869 to 1877. Grant led the Union Army in its victory over General Lee and the Confederate Army, ending the American Civil War. While Grant was a reluctant politician, he was unanimously nominated by the Republican Party. While in office, he stabilized the post-war economy, created the Department of Justice, and appointed both African and Jewish Americans in prominent public offices. Well, what did the S stand for? Superman? What do you mean it stands for nothing? It was the result of Congressman Thomas Hamer spelling it wrong when he nominated him to West Point. And he just kept it. Fallen soldiers, where is Cadet Ulysses S. Grant? It's just Ulysses Grant. Oh, it says here Ulysses S. Grant. No, but that's wrong. Ulysses is actually my middle name. My birth name's Hiram. Ulysses S. What spells US? Are you hearing a word I'm saying? All right, everyone, we're going to call US over here Uncle Sam to make better use of his initials. But those aren't me initials. Oh, whatever. No one's going to hear this outside of West Point anyway. Rutherford B. Hayes was the 19th president, serving from 1877 to 1881. What a B. How many other Rutherford Hayeses were there running around Washington at the time? While Hayes was committed to civil service reform and protecting civil rights, he is most remembered for losing the popular vote to Democrat Samuel Tilden in 1876, but won the Electoral College vote after a congressional commission awarded him 20 contested electoral votes. That's why I think the Electoral College is a big waste of time. What? Of course I know what the Electoral College is. It's where you elect to go to college. Hello?
I am too smart. I am too smart. SMRT.
James Garfield was the 20th president elected in 1881. Garfield would serve only 6.5 months, being assassinated by Charles Guiteau on July 2nd, 1881. Wait. Garfield didn't die until September 19th. What gives? Huh? He died from infections caused by his doctors over the resulting wound? Okay, who were his doctors then? They should get at least partial credit for the kill. Chester A. Arthur succeeded Garfield as the 21st president, serving from 1881 to 1885. While Arthur is considered to have a solid performance in office, he did reluctantly sign the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, which built on the Page Act of 1875. The act prohibited all immigration of Chinese labourers to the United States, while the Page Act banned Chinese women from immigrating to end the danger of cheap Chinese labour and immoral Chinese women. Oi, see that Chinese woman over there? She is so immoral. Yeah, she is. What's she been doing? Mistreating the elderly? Right? Stealing horses? Smoking the opium? No! She's been selling the sex. Well, that is just deplorable. For how much? Grover Cleveland was the 22nd president serving from 1885 to 1889. Grover was the first Democrat to be elected in office after the Civil War. He was also the only president to be married in the White House, marrying 21-year-old Frances Folsom in 1886. Oh, young love. How old was he at the time? 49. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. I just need a minute. Benjamin Harrison was the 23rd president from 1889 to 1893. Harrison was a colonel in the Union Army during the Civil War. As president, he passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, which protected trade and commerce against unlawful restraints and monopolies. He also signed the Land Revision Act of 1891, creating national forest reserves. He modernized the US Navy, added 6 western states to the Union, and was a part-time mall Santa. What? What do you mean that last one's not true? It was a wasted opportunity then. Look at that beard. It's majestic. Grover Cleveland was the 24th president. Hang on. Ain't we already done this, chap?
A deja vu is usually a glitch in the Matrix. It happens when they change something.
Cleveland was president, again, from 1893 to 1897. He was the only president to leave office and then return for a second term 4 years later. Grover's second term, unfortunately, was marred by the nation's economic disasters, and public perception showed him as one of the least popular presidents at the time. See, that's why he don't come out of retirement. You remember when Jordan came out of his second retirement to play for the Wizards, right? You might say that the magic was gone. You get it? You get it? Because magic, because he played for the Wizards. William McKinley was the 25th president from 1897 to 1901. His presidency saw economic growth with him passing the Gold Standard Act in 1900, which established gold as the only standard for redeeming paper money. He also promoted a tariff designed to protect manufacturers and factory workers from foreign competition called the Dingley Tariff of 1897. I'm sorry, what's it called? The Dingley Tariff? Dingley. The Dingley Tariff was authorized by Nelson Dingley Jr. I'm sorry. Dingley Jr. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I would like to apologise to any descendants of the Dingley family. I'm sorry. I can't do it. I can't do it. The Dingley family. McKinley would also defeat Spain in the Spanish-American War of 1898 for Cuban independence, which would make Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines into US colonies. McKinley would also succeed in the annexation of the Republic of Hawaii in 1898. I mean, I think we can all agree it's the greatest addition to the Union. Alaska can suck it. What do you mean I have to apologise to Alaska? Did I even get the internet? McKinley would die on September 14, 1901 from gangrene resulting from an assassin's bullet. The 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt, will be sworn in and serve 2 terms until 1909. Roosevelt is the youngest person to ever hold office, being a sprightly 42 when he was sworn in. Woo! 42, eh? Finally a young rebel to shake things up a bit. Roosevelt's domestic program was called the Square Deal and reflected his major political goals: conservation of natural resources, control of corporations, and protection of consumers. So much for him being a rebel. No wonder it was called the Square Deal.
It's hit the B square. It's hit the B square.
An assassination attempt on Roosevelt's life would fail in 1912, with the assassin's bullet penetrating his chest after passing through a steel eyeglass case and a copy of Roosevelt's 50-page speech. Roosevelt concluded that since he wasn't coughing blood, the bullet hadn't reached his lung. He would decline going immediately to hospital to deliver his 90-minute speech, all while blood was seeping through his shirt. Why is there not an action movie about this man's life? I'm thinking Tom Cruise plays Roosevelt and actually gets shot on set.
I'm the guy. This is the guy.
This is the guy.
I'm the guy. I'm the guy.
You are a guy.
I'm the guy. I'm a guy.
William Taft was the 27th president, serving from 1909 to 1913. Taft would go on to serve as Chief Justice from 1921 to 1930, and he would be the only person to ever hold both offices. I believe he also has a record for the finest presidential stash. Just look at that thing. Huh? What do you mean there's no such record? Well, there should be. Woodrow Wilson was the 28th president, serving from 1913 to 1921. Wilson would see the nation through World War I. Wait a minute. Woodrow Wilson, WW, right, was president during World War WW1. There's a conspiracy theory there, I just know it.
Coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. I look in the mail. Well, this whole box is Pepe Sylvia.
When the war first broke, Wilson maintained neutrality between the Allied and Central Powers, but would enter the war in 1917 after the German Empire implemented a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. Starting off strong and then overreaching, causing inevitable defeat. Classic Germany. Warren Harding was the 29th president, serving from 1921 to 1923, and originated resting face. What? Look at that photo! What would you call it then? While Harding would die of a heart attack before his term was over, his presidency was rocked by a number of scandals that came to light after his death. Harding had appointed a number of friends to federal positions, and while some served admirably, a number used their positions to increase their own personal gains. Ain't that how the entire government's run nowadays?
Of course!
Calvin Coolidge was Harding's vice president and would succeed him as the 30th president, serving from 1923 to 1929. He gained a reputation as a conservative who believed in small government, a system where the government has minimal involvement in certain areas of public policy or the private sector. He also managed to restore public confidence in the White House after the scandals of the Harding administration. It's said that he said little and had a dry sense of humour. Well, I guess you could say that Calvin was quite cool-idge. Even I don't think that's funny. Be sure to check out our next episode, part 3 of our history of the US presidents, starting off with Herbert Hoover, the man who invented the vacuum cleaner. This time we're starting off with the 31st President of the United States, Herbert Hoover, who was in office from 1929 to 1933. While Hoover would have some success holding government positions under other presidents, his own term was not seen as a good one due to the stock market crash of 1929, resulting in the Great Depression. That's a weird name, isn't it? How was the Depression? It was great.
Most illogical reaction.
The stock market crashed in October of 1929, resulting in years of unemployment, poverty, deflation, and a loss of confidence in the country's economic future. What marred Hoover's time in office was his seeming lack of initiative to combat the crisis. This resulted in his decisive defeat by Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1932 election. Again, with the middle initial, I bet it stands for Democrat. Franklin Democrat Roosevelt. What? Delano. Look, if you don't know it, you don't have to make something up. Delano. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR as he was often called, served as the 32nd president from 1933 until his death in 1945. Wait, that's longer than 8 years. How many terms did he serve? He was elected 4 times, but died only 3 months into his last term. Wait, so when was the term limit established then? 1951? So all presidents who served 2 terms beforehand just opted out after? Well, being president must have been rubbish if you wanted to quit after just 8 years.
Free!
FDR was the 5th cousin of the 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt, and Franklin's wife was Theodore's niece. So that would make her his 5th cousin once removed? But you know what though? I want fifth cousins, right? That's like practically being step cousins. But, you know, gross.
I don't know what it is. But when I kiss you, it's like I'm kissing my brother.
FDR would see the country through its economic crisis with his New Deal, which was a series of programs, financial reforms and regulations put in place to provide relief and recovery from the obnoxious depression. What? No, I refuse to lift it up by calling it great. That's right, I'm depression shaming.
I'm going to allow it.
FDR would also see the nation through World War II. He would attempt to keep the United States out of the war, while still providing diplomatic and financial support for China, the United Kingdom, and eventually the Soviet Union. But all that changed on December 7, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. FDR called it a date which will live in infamy, and got a congressional declaration of war against Japan, along with one against Germany and Italy just days later. Didn't I say in the last video that Hawaii was the best addition to the Union? Right, the United States would have just stayed out of it, but no. They had to go and attack the best state ever. What a bunch of knobs. FDR would start development on the atomic bomb, which would also be used in retaliation against Japan. But he also worked with other Allied leaders to lay the groundwork for the United Nations. Which finally allowed linguists to put their degrees to good use, eh? Harry S. Truman was FDR's vice president and would succeed him as the 33rd president, serving from 1945 to 1953. And there it is again. That middle initial, right? Unless there was another Harry Truman that was president, it's not needed. You know what? From now on, when I start seeing those, I'm just going to make up what the name means. Harry Stefan Truman. Got a nice ring to it, don't you think?
Of course!
World War II would come to an end in the months after FDR's death, but that didn't make things any easier for Truman. He would have to handle the start of the Cold War, and he would gain United Nations approval to intervene when North Korea invaded South Korea in what would be known as the Korean War. That's not a terribly original name, is it? I mean, North versus South sounds to me like the American Civil War all over again. So what about Civil War II, Korean Boogaloo? Yeah? What? What do you mean they're two separate countries? While in office, Truman's domestic policies would face opposition in Congress, but he would guide the economy through post-war challenges. He also submitted comprehensive civil rights legislation, issuing Executive Order 9981. He wiped out the Jedi? What? It was to start racial integration into the military and federal agencies. Well, I still don't make it okay for him to murder Jedi.
You rebel scum.
Dwight Donatello Eisenhower was the 34th president from 1953 to 1961. What? Dwight was his middle name? Wait, so his name was Dwight Eisenhower? His first name was David? Look, you can't go switching your names about all willy-nilly. I don't care if you are president. You don't see me going by Elizabeth K. Burroughs. Eisenhower's national security policy was called the New Look and was intended to balance the Cold War military commitment with the nation's financial resources by reducing the cost of nuclear weapons and the funding of expensive military divisions. After the Soviets launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, Eisenhower would also authorize the establishment of NASA, which in turn started the space race. Oi, do you think we should tell them that we already did a video on the history of space travel covering all that? Yeah, you're right. That'd be a bit tacky. Eisenhower would also sign the Civil Rights Act of 1957 to provide federal protection for African American voting rights. Unfortunately, opponents of the act were able to strip away certain provisions, limiting its effectiveness. Near the end of his time in office, Eisenhower also approved the Bay of Pigs invasion, but that was left to his successor to handle. You know, I really think we should tell him that we also made a video on the history of the Bay of Pigs. Alright, you're the boss. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the 35th president from 1961 to 1963. What's that? What? His middle name actually is Fitzgerald. Well, bollocks. Kennedy was a Democrat in office at the height of the Cold War. As a result, most of his presidential efforts went to dealing with the Soviet Union and Cuba, who would authorize the Cuban Project in November of 1961, a covert CIA operation against Fidel Castro's government, also known as Operation Mongoose. Who names these operations? Alright men, the Cuban project is a go. Is that what we're calling it? Aren't you worried that will clue people into what we're doing? Alright, you're so smart, what would you call it then? Operation, Ricky Tikki Tavi, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Ricky Tikki Tavi. Yeah, my kid's been reading a book for school. It's about a mongoose that battles a snake. Well, Castro is a snake in my book, but yours is a bit wordy, so let's call it Operation Mongoose Battles Snake. In 1962, US spy planes discovered Soviet missile bases had been deployed in Cuba, and this almost resulted in thermonuclear war on a global scale. Known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK would reach an agreement with Soviet Premier Khrushchev after some tense negotiations. The public terms of the agreement would see the Soviets dismantle their weapons in Cuba and return them to the Soviet Union, while the Americans would agree to avoid invading Cuba again. Oh, I like that wording. As part of the agreement with the Soviets, the United States declares that we agree to avoid invading Cuba unless it becomes unavoidable. Or should we really, really want to? JFK would be assassinated on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, Texas by Lee Harvey Oswald. While a special commission concluded that Oswald acted alone in the assassination, there are still many who believe Kennedy was killed as part of a conspiracy with multiple people involved. Oh, I don't want to end on conspiracy stuff with Kennedy. What about his ties to organised crime? What? That's also unsubstantiated. Alright, what about all his extramarital affairs then? Didn't he shag Marilyn Monroe?
By the way, this young lady is not my wife, but I am sleeping with her. I'm telling you this because I'm comfortable with my womanizing.
Lyndon B. Johnson was Kennedy's vice president and would succeed him as the 36th president, serving from 1963 to 1969. Lyndon Bartholomew Johnson had a strong start to his presidency, expanding civil rights, Medicare and Medicaid, urban development, aid to education and the arts, and declaring war on poverty. Wait, he sent an army to attack poor people?
I don't think it means what you think it means.
The war on poverty was legislation put in place by Johnson to apply government funding to eliminate poverty and improve living conditions for low-income neighbourhoods. I wouldn't call that a war. It don't sound like any guns were involved. Unfortunately for Johnson, the involvement in the Vietnam War, rioting in major cities, and an increased crime rate greatly diminished his approval rating by the end of his office. Well, no wonder the Vietnam War was a disaster. You heard how he attacked poverty. Richard Nixon was the 37th president, serving from 1969 to 1974. During his time in office, he would end America's involvement in the Vietnam War and end the military draft the same year. He would also establish diplomatic relations with China in 1972, established the Environmental Protection Agency, presided over the Apollo 11 moon landing, and began the war on cancer. Must have been worse than Johnson's war on poverty, because last time I checked, cancer is kicking our ass. Nixon is the only president to have resigned from office after the Watergate scandal would have surely seen him impeached and removed from office by trial in the Senate. The scandal was the result of the Nixon administration's continued attempts to cover up involvement in a failed break-in of the DNC headquarters at the Watergate office building in DC. 69 people were indicted, with 48 being convicted. Well, I don't remember hearing about Nixon going to jail. What's that? He was pardoned by the next president.
It's good to be the king.
Quick question. Will there be any point in the future where we're not talking about presidents? Be sure to check out our next episode, part 4 of our history of the US presidents, starting off with Gerald Ford. Wasn't his wife a boozer? We're starting off with the 38th President of the United States, Gerald Ford, who was in office from 1977 to 1974. Ford was Richard Nixon's Vice President and took office after Nixon's resignation. Interestingly enough, Ford was not Nixon's original Vice President, but took over after the original VP, Spiro Agnew, resigned over tax evasion and money laundering charges. As a result, Ford is the only person to have served as both President and Vice President without ever being elected to either position by the Electoral College. Who says you can't middle your way to the top? During his time in office, Ford would sign the Helsinki Accords, a document signed by 35 countries in an effort to ease tensions with the Soviet bloc during the Cold War. Unfortunately for Ford, on the domestic front, he would contend with one of the worst economies since the Great Depression. The nation's economy suffered from growing inflation and a recession with high unemployment throughout Ford's tenure. Hang on, now that just don't make no sense. You can't be both recessed and inflated. That's just science. One of the most controversial decisions made by Ford was his presidential pardon of Richard Nixon for his involvement in the Watergate scandal. Critics of the decision believe that Ford made a deal with Nixon to resign in exchange for the pardon so that he could be president. Others have cited that he pardoned Nixon due to their friendship. Regardless of his reason, it made him look bad in the public eye and was no doubt the reason he lost the 1976 election to Jimmy Carter. That makes him 0-1, since he was never elected to begin with.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Jimmy Carter was the 39th president from 1977 to 1981. During Carter's term, the Department of Energy and the Department of Education would be created. Carter would also establish a national energy policy in an effort to promote conservation. He would also pursue various peace treaties and international arms reduction. It sounds like he had a pretty good run. What's that? What do you mean, keep reading? Throughout his term, Carter's administration dealt with constant inflation with high unemployment and slow economic growth in what is known as stagflation. Stagflation? Please tell me politicians don't actually use that term. Sounds like an intestinal blockage. I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you. What is it, Doctor? It's a case of stagflation. We're going to have to administer a rectal laxative. Near the end of Carter's term, he had to contend with the Iran hostage crisis, where 52 American diplomats were held hostage for 444 days. It was a sordid affair, including a film directed by Ben Affleck and a botched rescue attempt in April of 1980. A resolution wouldn't be seen until Iraq invaded Iran in September of 1980, which forced Iran to negotiate with the United States. The start of the Iran-Iraq war would also lead to the 1979 energy crisis, resulting in the cost of crude oil more than doubling in price. See? That's why I think we should still be running everything on steam power.
Eureka! We done it!
In 1979, the Soviet army would invade Afghanistan, prompting Carter to escalate the Cold War, negating the positive efforts of the previous administration. Carter's administration would also lead a boycott against the 1980 Olympic Games, which were hosted in Moscow, to protest the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. I can get behind that. I'd boycott all the Olympic Games. What? No reason? I just don't like watching people who are better than me put on display about how they're better than me.
Get used to disappointment.
Ronald Reagan would win the 1980 election in a landslide victory, making him the 40th president, serving from 1981 to 1989. Before becoming president, Reagan was an actor and president of the Screen Actors Guild before becoming governor of California in 1966. What is it with California letting actors run the state? I mean, I wouldn't be mad at Governor Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Daddy's gotta go to work.
As president, Reagan is most known for his economic initiatives designed to lower inflation and stimulate economic growth, known as Reaganomics. Only an actor turned politician would inject his name into his policies like some sort of movie title. If he were a real politician, it would have been called Reagan's War on Inflation. What's that? He supported the war on drugs? Yeah, but did he declare the war? I think not.
Everybody wants to be cool. But doing it with crack isn't just wrong. It could be dead wrong.
Reaganomics was not immediately successful, with results only starting to appear near re-election time in 1984. Well, that seems convenient. Over the course of his 2 terms, Reagan's administration lowered the nation's inflation from 12.5% to 4.4%. Hang on, you never said I'd have to talk about maths. On March 30th, 1981, Reagan was shot and wounded by John Hinckley Jr., who made the assassination attempt in order to impress Jodie Foster. While Reagan was close to death upon arrival at the hospital. Wait, hang on. He tried to assassinate the president to impress an actress? Wait, did it work? No, see, I knew it didn't. You know, if there's one thing I know about Jodie Foster, it's that she's anti-presidential murder. I don't know where she stands on regular murder, though.
Well, now what do we do? You're not going to turn me in, are you?
America was back in full swing of the Cold War with Russia during Reagan's 2 terms, with Reagan increasing the US's arsenal, resulting in an arms race with Russia until 1987, when Reagan and Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev would sign the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, shrinking both nations' nuclear arsenals. Wait, so they was using, like, tiny nukes?
They made it strong. They made it clever. They made it small.
George Bush, Reagan's vice president, would succeed him as the 41st president, serving from 1989 to 1993. Bush would see the country through the final years of the Cold War with Russia and played an important part in the reunification of Germany, something that his predecessor was also actively involved in. You know, people are always talking about the Berlin Wall coming down, but the last time I checked, China has a much bigger wall still standing and no one says a word. Bush would preside over the Gulf War, a coalition of 35 countries led by the United States who waged war against Iraq in response to their invasion of Kuwait on August 2nd of 1990. You know, all of this stuff was over control of oil. I'm just saying, steam would solve everyone's problems. Bush would sign the North American Trade Agreement, which would reduce trade barriers between America, Canada and Mexico, though it wouldn't be ratified until his successor's term. He would also sign a bill that increased taxes to lower the federal budget deficit, breaking one of his campaign promises. Why would that surprise anyone? Everyone knows a campaign promise is code for lie anyway.
Turn off his microphone!
On July 26, 1990, Bush would sign the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits discrimination based on disability. Oh, great. So Bush is the reason that Trump's president, because that man is extremely disabled. What? Wasn't he kicked in the head by a horse or something when he was a child? No. You mean he's that way on purpose?
I know words. I have the best words.
Bill Clinton was the 42nd president, serving from 1993 to 2001. And I think that we all know what Bill Clinton is most remembered for as president. That's right, signing the Iraq Liberation Act in opposition of Saddam Hussein. Huh? Well, what did you think I was talking about then? Oh. Well, why should anyone care who he does after hours? I mean, what he does after hours? During the last 3 years of Clinton's administration, it was reported that the government had a budget surplus, which hadn't happened since 1969. Upon leaving office, he had the highest approval rating of any president since World War II. But you're saying all the people remember is that one thing. Perverts.
I finally got to him. The power of the press triumphs.
Clinton would become the second president to be impeached. The impeachment was the result of Clinton perjuring himself to conceal an affair with 22-year-old White House intern Monica Lewinsky. Clinton would be acquitted by the Senate and finish out his term. See? Now I'm done. What's that? Lewinsky actually suffered for a long time afterwards due to all the negative media coverage of her from the affair. Well, that's not right. He was the one in the position of power. You'd have had sex with him too if you was in her place. What? I know you're a man. George W. Bush would serve as the 43rd president from 2001 to 2009. Now this is the one time that I'm okay with the middle initial, since there was another President George Bush, his father.
Son, do you know what it means to be president of the United States? Everyone looks up to you. You're the most powerful leader of the most powerful nation in the whole world.
It's gonna be cool, Dad. I'm pretty psyched.
And don't think it's lost on me that the first time we got a father-son presidential situation that's slightly monarchistic, right? That they're both named George. You know the history of how your country was founded, yeah? Huh? What? What do you mean they probably don't? Well, yeah, but they've all seen Hamilton, right? You know it's George I'm talking about, don't you? Da 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 da. On September 11th, 2001, terrorists attacked the World Trade Center Twin Towers, resulting in almost 3,000 fatalities and 25,000 injuries. In response, Bush created the Department of Homeland Security and launched a war on terror. You know what I'm learning from all this? You're not a real president until you've declared war on a thing. Not a country, a thing.
Brilliantly worked out, Wadsworth. I congratulate you.
Me too!
Shut up!
In 2003, Bush would declare war on an actual country, starting the Iraq War on the argument that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, though no WMDs would ever be found in the country. Bush would also pass legislation such as the Patriot Act and the No Child Left Behind Act. Now see, that's just wrong. Some children should be left behind. Huh? Because they're stupid. I would like to apologise for my previous statements to the parents of any stupid children out there. Sorry, what I meant to say was that I apologise to the stupid children themselves. What? What am I apologising for then? What do you mean I'm a stupid child? That don't even make no sense. I'm an adult. During his second term, Bush would see a lot of criticism for his handling of the Iraq War, Hurricane Katrina, and the Great Recession. Oh, here we go again. Calling something terrible great. What? It's great in size, not quality. Sort of makes my outrage a bit silly when you put it like that. Barack Obama would become the 44th president, serving from 2009 to 2017. And boy, how he is missed now that he's gone. What? I know he's not dead. I just wish he was still president, that's all. Obama would be the first African American to serve as Commander-in-Chief. One of his biggest reforms would come in the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as it would be commonly known. Ha! Obamacare. Okay, Reagan.
I just want to say to my critics, I hear your voices, and I'm aware of your concerns.
Bro, don't even get me started on these motherfuckers right here.
Obama would repeal the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act, which prevented gay, lesbian and bisexual people from serving openly in the military. He was also a supporter of LGBT inclusion and rights in America. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. You know, everyone's a little bit gay. What? Oh, let it go. But yes, you definitely would have had sex with Clinton. Obama would also deal with a number of military matters, ending military involvement in the Iraq War in 2011, only to send them back to thwart the terrorist organisation ISIL in 2014. He would also order the military operation that would result in the death of Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. He also brokered a nuclear deal with Iran and eased hostility with Cuba, becoming the first president to visit the country since 1928. Sounds like Obama's really the one that declared war on terror. I miss him so much. Do I really have to? I know he's president right now, but I don't want to talk about him. Oh, alright, but you're not going to like it. Donald Trump would sign a pact with the devil to secure his place as the 45th president of the United States. What? Well, how would you explain it then? He lost the popular vote. Only thing I've learned about the Electoral College from all this presidential stuff is that I don't like it. As of the recording of this video, Trump is still president, approaching the end of his first and hopefully only term in office. While in office, he's said things. Stupid things. Offensive things. Idiotic things. Dishonest things. And things unbecoming a president. I'm honestly not saying any more about him. If you're seeing this now, you've lived his administration and don't need to be reminded of it. Well, that's a real downer ending. Can't I just talk about Teddy Roosevelt again? Now there was a president.
Some men are born great. Others have greatness thrust upon them. For you, this is that very moment.
There you have it, everyone. A brief history of the US presidents. Let me know what sort of history topics you'd like to see me discuss in future videos in the comments below. Thanks, and I'll see you all in the future. Dinkley! I need a tissue! Thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and a share. Don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon to be notified when more Brief History of the Past videos go up. And check out some of the other videos we have on the channel. You might find something else that you like.